I got to go through my running back rankings. Last episode, if you want to check it out, make sure you check out the last episode. I went through the first couple tiers of wide receivers. Today, I want to go through my top 3 tiers of running backs. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys on my top running backs and give you a chance to see those. I've sorted them out into the first 3 tiers. Now, I didn't make it anything crazy where it was like this running back is so far down, or like there's, the tiers are just Jonathan Taylor and then the next person. I made it to where this is based on ADP and kind of where you can expect to draft these guys. So the first tier that I want to talk about, obviously, is Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Najee Harris, right? So that's in the first 3 picks. I really think Jonathan Taylor probably doesn't end up as the running back 1. Now, hear me out. The reason why I have him ranked there is because he's the safest running back on the board. Do I think he's going to lead the league in rushing and touchdowns again? I think there's going to be a newcomer there. That always happens. But do I think his role is secure? He's very healthy. He's young. He's the kind of player that if you take him, you don't have to worry too much about him having too many major injuries or not producing at the level that he did. His role is consistent. The Indianapolis Colts are going to be running the football, and they got Matt Ryan in there to make sure that they can throw the football to balance it out. So my concerns with Jonathan Taylor are that Matt Ryan is going to come in there and probably throw a little bit more than Carson Wentz did last year. And they're also looking to bring in Nyheim Hines, get him more involved in the offense. So they spent draft capital getting Alec Pierce. They drafted Jelani Woods. I think that this offense is going to take a step forward in the passing game. Now, I know that they're going to run the ball still. They'll still use Jonathan Taylor in the red zone. He's still going to be phenomenal for fantasy purposes. Locked in top 5 running back, in my opinion. But I don't think he carries the same upside as some of the other guys ranked right after him, including Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey now is probably one of the more risky picks, but his upside, 25-point upside, he's a game changer. When Christian McCaffrey plays, he carries the highest upside of any fantasy football player. He'll have one of the best seasons you can have at the running back position because of his ability to stretch regular plays into long touchdowns. He catches the rock phenomenally. His major thing is injuries. He's been injured for the last 2 seasons. So we need to see Christian McCaffrey healthy, but when he plays, he's such a game changer that you have to rank him above some of even the healthiest players. Like some players, Austin Ekeler last year was phenomenal, but you have to put Christian McCaffrey because of his ability to lead the league significantly at the running back position. You got to put him there at number 2. He does have a smaller frame and carry a lot of injury risks. So, therein lies why I don't have him as my number 1. If you want to put him at number 1, I ain't going to be mad at you. Now, the player that I think can make the push for running back 1 this season is Najee Harris. Najee Harris, there's a lot of concerns with Najee Harris as far as productivity. The advanced analytics don't like Najee Harris. I do. I like Najee Harris a lot because I like the volume. I like that Pittsburgh attack, and I think they get him the ball a lot this year. There's some pundits out there who are going to say, oh, well, Najee Harris had 14 catches in 1 game, so his numbers are inflated. I see Najee Harris as an asset that's only going to get better. Ben Roethlisberger is not on this team anymore. And Ben Roethlisberger was airing it out his last year, even passing it to Najee Harris, but a lot of his targets were going to Deontay Johnson. He didn't have the arm strength. The teams were not scared of him. So a lot of Najee Harris's run analytics do not look good. 3.9 yards per carry last season. I think Najee Harris is better than that. That was his rookie year, and I see him significantly improving those rushing numbers this season. Is he the guy that's going to run for 2,000 yards this year? I don't think so. But is he going to have 350 touches, probably close to 75 to 100 catches? Yes. He's going to be in that range. And whether it's Mitch Trubisky starting or it's Kenny Pickett starting or even Mason Rudolph, if it's him starting, Najee's workload is guaranteed. He's young. The same thing we're talking about with Jonathan Taylor when it comes to his, the age and youth and staying injury-free. The same thing applies to Najee Harris, who's also put on some muscle, some good muscle, good weight. Like you hear about players and weight in the offseason, normally it's a bad thing, but Najee added some muscle, still at 6% body fat or less or something like that crazy. So to me, Najee Harris has everything you want to see in a running back. And I think that Najee Harris has the opportunity to really improve on those analytic numbers. So they're going to use him in the red zone a lot. He only had 9 touchdowns total last year. So if Najee Harris gets to 15 touchdowns, he finished as the running back 3 last year. Like, as the running back 3 in a bad season with bad analytics and no red zone touch, like minimal red zone efficiency. So if we see a step up in the red zone, we see a step up in the efficiency, we see an increase in targets, I don't see a reason why Najee can't finish as the running back 1. Moving on to Dalvin Cook, who has been faded a lot by a lot of people. They're putting him in the back end of that, their running backs after a lot of these guys that I'm going to talk about right now. Dalvin Cook to me has upside. He's finished as the running back 2, 3, and 10 in the past 3 seasons, and he's been hurt for most of those time. He misses 3 games a year. Like, that's just who Dalvin Cook is. So even if he misses time this year, which I could see happening, he's been nicked up pretty much his whole career. I still see Dalvin as somebody who can finish as a top 3 to 5 running back. So you have to put him there. His upside, if he plays all 17 games, is even higher than some of these other guys. So Dalvin Cook to me is a player that you have to keep him in your top 5. I understand if you want to put Derrick Henry maybe above him, but Joe Mixon, Austin Ekeler, those guys don't necessarily have the same upside that Dalvin has if he plays all 17 games. Now he's been hurt, so if you're scared of the injuries, a good thing to do is get Alexander Mattison, who's one of the top backup running backs in fantasy football. But Dalvin Cook, you can't play scared of injuries, whether it's Christian McCaffrey, it's Dalvin. A lot of running backs get hurt. It's one of the more frequently injured positions. So it's tough because if those guys miss 3 or 4 games, that changes their end of the season ranking so much. And Dalvin still finishes the top 10 running back, even missing those games. So Dalvin Cook to me is one of those players I really like his style of play. He has the long touchdowns you like to see. He catches the rock. And they've actually been talking about getting him more involved in the passing game, which you love to hear as a fantasy player because it means more catches for our fantasy teams, especially in those PPR formats. So don't let Dalvin Cook slip too far just because the name, the injury concerns, he's an older back. Don't let that scare you. At number 5, Derrick Henry, one of the safer players that you can take. We know he's going to get the rock. He's just coming off of an injury. He plays on a bad team, quote unquote, bad Tennessee Titans offense where they traded away A.J. Brown. I'm not as concerned as everybody else. Like, I think Derrick Henry, even with 8 in the box, we've seen him take off for 99 yards with 8 in the box before. I don't really think that Derrick Henry is going to have a bad season. Now, I'm ranking him this low because if something were to happen, if he gets nicked up towards the end of the year, I could see him sitting for the fantasy playoffs, which is the more important time that you need him. Like, if something gets an ankle injury or hamstring injury, I don't see Derrick Henry playing through it because I don't think the Titans are going to be that good this year. Their offense is going to be better than people think, though, with Treylon Burks, with Robert Woods there. Ryan Tannehill's been a solid key in that offense, and they have a decent offensive line. So Derrick Henry is still going to be productive. Now, like I said, my major concern with him is towards fantasy playoffs. Will he be there or will they mail it in? If something happens to him, is he going to play through those games, play through those injuries? So they were a playoff team last year. He came back fast from injury. But we've seen with those injuries, they do tend to linger. So just be careful with Derrick Henry. Rounding out my tier 1 is Joe Mixon and Austin Ekeler, who have been consistent, really good options over the last year or two. And Joe Mixon, Austin Ekeler, to me, are both solid. They're going to be solid options. They just don't carry the same upside. Like, we saw Austin Ekeler finish as the running back 2 last year with almost 20 touchdowns. That's not happening. His career numbers were all in single digits for touchdowns before that. So they drafted Isaiah Spiller. I don't see Austin Ekeler reproducing those touchdown numbers. And I think they lower his touches now that they have a viable running back to come in and take goal line carries and some of the burden away from Austin Ekeler. They want to keep him healthy because I think this team thinks they can make the playoffs. So Ekeler, to me, that's why I have him down at the bottom. And Joe Mixon's pretty much going to duplicate what he did last year unless he gets hurt. The Cincinnati O-line is solid. The passing game is there. I can see him duplicating his results from last year. I just don't see him being more than that. So they already have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase on that offense. And to me, there's not really room for more growth when it comes to Joe Mixon. So that rounds out tier 1. Tier 2, let's get into it. A bunch of question marks. So there's more question marks with these guys. Some of them still have the potential, like when I talk Saquon Barkley, Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb. These guys have the upside you want to see to finish as top 5 backs, but there's a lot more risk involved with them. Saquon Barkley's coming off of 2 seasons being hurt, but when he plays, he's dynamic. He's almost in that Christian McCaffrey elite type tier where he can win you a week. He puts up tremendous numbers, but we need to see Saquon Barkley go through an entire season healthy. So You take Saquon Barkley in the second round, just know he can potentially be a top 5, top 3 running back. Like, that's not out of the realm of possibilities when it comes to Saquon Barkley. I think you're getting a steal if you get him in the back end of the second round. And even the top of the third round, I've seen Saquon get faded way too hard. And that's in 10-man, 12-man leagues. So if you're in an 18 league, he's probably going to be third or fourth round, but just make sure he doesn't slip too far in your drafts. Aaron Jones, same thing. He's been a top 10, 5 running back his entire career, even with some of his injuries. And so I don't know why he's falling as far as well. The running back position is very deep this year. So you can get good guys in the second round, like an Aaron Jones or Saquon Barkley, and they could easily finish top 5. Aaron Jones actually has a little bit more potential this year because he's going to see more receiving work. Davante Adams is now gone. So with Davante Adams gone, I can see Aaron Jones taking on a lot of that passing game work. And we've seen him have crazy weeks when Davante's been out, like 10-catch games, using him in the red zone. So don't count out Aaron Jones having a monster year, especially because they didn't bring anybody in really to replace Davante Adams. They're sticking with the receivers they got. I got Sammy Watkins. Obviously, Allen Lazard needs to come in and play a role. Christian Watson's going to be good as a second-round pick. Might take him a while. And then Romeo Doubs is in training camp playing well. But Aaron Jones, to me, is going to be the biggest beneficiary of the Davante Adams outside of Allen Lazard. The biggest beneficiary. I think he's going to play a major role in the passing game. Nick Chubb. So Nick Chubb, whether Deshaun Watson plays or not, is going to be a top 10 running back. That's just the way he plays. He's one of the best, at actual pure running the football. Him and Derrick Henry are just like really good runners and bruisers. But purely as a runner, you want Nick Chubb on your team. He doesn't catch very many passes. So I would say that's the one thing in PPR leagues. Maybe you scale him back a little bit behind some of these other guys with more upside. But we know he's consistent. He's going to get the yards. He's going to get touchdowns. And Nick Chubb's just a dog. So unless he starts catching the rock more, you got to peg him down just a little bit. DeAndre Swift is up next. Alvin Kamara, Javonte Williams, they all kind of carry that receiving upside that you like to see. And all of them have potential to be top 10 running backs. But all their situations, Kamara's probably going to move up over DeAndre Swift on my board now that we have a little bit more clarity on his situation. Because we've seen Alvin Kamara, we didn't know if he was going to get a 4-game suspension, a 6-game suspension. I'm probably going to move him up over DeAndre Swift on my board. He carries more upside to me. DeAndre Swift and Javonte Williams are both going to be solid. DeAndre Swift's going to get more catches, carries a little bit more injury risk. But Javonte Williams has a quarterback now with Russell Wilson. There was a lot of people that thought he could take the leap into that top 5, top 8 running backs. But I think with Russ there, it makes things easier for him. But he does have his ceiling capped a little bit. So I'm worried a little bit about Javonte Williams' ceiling, especially with Melvin Gordon still lurking in the background. So he hasn't fully taken over that starting role. They're talking about a 60-40 or 70-30 split. I like both of those for Javonte Williams. I think he has a really good season. Could finish as an RB1, but to me, he's more of a high-end RB2. And then when we're talking David Montgomery and Zeke, there's some question marks there. I'm probably going to move Zeke over David Montgomery as well. I think Zeke has been faded a little too hard. He's been a top 10 running back every year he's been in the league, despite missing games as well. So I'm going to move him up over David Montgomery. I'm actually going to do that right now on this show and show you guys I'm willing to adjust. We make moves, baby. We don't stick with the same information. We try to win. I don't care about being right. I care about winning. And that right there is a winning move, moving Ezekiel Elliott over David Montgomery. To me, Zeke, like I said, he's been faded a little too hard. Everybody's expecting Tony Pollard to come in and take over the role. I don't see that happening. Tony Pollard is being featured more in the passing game now. And the team is really back to Zeke. So we've seen him have success. He was a top 10 back last year as an injured back. Like he was playing through injury. So I'm done fading Zeke. I'm moving him up my board. He's an elite talent. No more fading Ezekiel Elliott. If you can get him, that's the perfect range. He doesn't carry maybe some, he's not as flashy as like a Travis Etienne, but he's a rock solid player that you can't miss. And David Montgomery, they're just that team right now. The Bears in general are not a good football team. So I'm not counting on David Montgomery being a good football player again. I think he'll be average. He'll be a mid-tier RB2, but I don't see him having any kind of upside in that offense. They're going to use him a lot, and I think he's a dynamic real football back. He just, to me, doesn't have some upside, and you got to have upside in fantasy football to win. He'll be a solid player, and he might fall in your drafts, which is a good thing. If he falls behind some of these other players, then take him. But right now at his ADP, I think you can do a little bit better. And then this last tier features Leonard Fournette, who's a dog. He kind of is in that same Montgomery territory, except he's on a better football team. So Leonard Fournette is in a better situation. There's a lot of question marks with that offensive line now. They also brought in Rachaad White to take back some of the workload for Leonard Fournette. He's dealt with injuries. There's just a lot of concerns that I have with Leonard Fournette this season. I'm actually personally moving him down the board this year, even though he had a really good season. He was a top 10 running back last season. I just don't see him replicating that this year. Travis Etienne is a running back who has been soaring on fantasy radars, fantasy rankings. He's been soaring up the rankings, and yes, for good reason. He's going to be heavily involved in the passing game, and Jacksonville's going to be using him as a receiver as well, and a running back. James Robinson is starting to get healthy. The team drafted Snoop Conner, who's not really a huge threat yet to take on any type of workload. So Travis Etienne has the makeup of a top 10. What you want to see in the later rounds is a potential top 10 back. That's what you see. A lot of unknown with him. We haven't seen him on the field. So he could have a really good season. I'm getting kind of scared of where he's being drafted right now. A lot of people are starting to reach on Travis Etienne. He's not somebody I would reach for, but he is definitely somebody that if he fell to me in a good spot behind some of these other guys, I'd take him. J.K. Dobbins is up here. I am excited for J.K. Dobbins. Talked about it earlier. He is getting healthy. Gus Edwards will be out week 1, so the workload is going to be there. You would think they'll probably ease him in the first couple games, but by midseason, we should be seeing a full workload of J.K. Dobbins, which to me screams high upside RB2. I think every week, unless he gets him more involved in the passing game, he will be slightly limited when it comes to like receptions. But I can see J.K. Dobbins having a really good year. So just be on the lookout. Don't let him fall too far. He might be, if you're playing in more of a casual league, he might be a name that slips down people's radars because he was hurt last year and he's not well known. We haven't seen him produce for an entire season. So just don't let J.K. Dobbins fall too far in your draft. James Conner produced at a high level last year. A lot of people will probably take him. I expect him to produce very similar results as he did in the second half last year. We saw him have some really big weeks early on. He was getting a lot of touchdowns. And then later on, that workload kind of caught up to him. So Kyler Murray is back. James Conner will still be a really good real-life player, probably score a lot of touchdowns. I'm just not taking him over some of the other guys that have a little bit more upside. Breece Hall, rookie for the Jets. I'm excited about him. Super good talent. Might be a little too low on the rankings, but I like his upside. And we got to see. It's the Jets. So the Jets are normally not a very good football team. And they also have Michael Carter, who they drafted last year. I don't think he's going to be too much of a threat to take away touches, but early on, it might be somewhat of a split, like a 60-40 split, 50-50 split even. I could see Breece Hall taking over this role and being very dynamic in the second half of the season, which is what you want to see. And then the last player, Antonio Gibson, finished as a top 12 running back last year. And it's funny because you would think you would have him a little bit higher, but the team has reinvested in J.D. McKissick in the passing game, drafted Brian Robinson as well, and then said they want to reduce Antonio Gibson's workload, who played injured last season. I don't know what to think of it because he's been productive when he's been on the field, but you don't want to hear that kind of talk in training camp about reducing workload and then actually seeing them sign another running back and draft a running back. To me, that screams that they probably will reduce his workload a little bit less, more than it was last year. Coming into the season, they said they wanted to use him like Christian McCaffrey, and we got Christian McCaffrey results where he got hurt. So Antonio Gibson's a fine guy. If you're going zero RB, I actually like taking Antonio Gibson because I think he has a safe role. But just be careful with that. He's a more of a question mark than you want to have as your starter for the most part. But if you got a lot of good wide receivers and tight ends early on, he's not a bad running back 1, running back 2 to have. So that does it for the Zero RB. The Zero RB, man. I like this little segment going through some of these rankings. Next, I'll do quarterbacks and talk them. And then next week when I get back, I'm going to the Fantasy Football Expo in Canton, Ohio. Going to check out the Hall of Fame, so that'll be fun. When I get back next week, I'll go over some of the other tier, like the next tiers down for wide receivers as well.